Emily Rizzini had a magnetic quality that enthralled everyone she came across. She was always the center of attention at social events, lively and aspirational. By contrast, her older sister Isabella Rizzini was the reverse. Reserved and methodical, Isabella favored the quiet comfort of her study, where she could fully engage herself in her forensic botanical work. Though they had always caused conflict with their different personalities, they bonded only sisters could. All changed, though, when Isabella married the charming chef Lorenzo Moretti, whose gastronomic skills had won praise in gourmet circles. Unquestionably charming Lorenzo was, and Emily soon found herself irresistibly pulled to him. Friends, sorry to interrupt, but please help me reach 1,500 subscribers by the end of the summer. I will be very pleased. Let's keep going. Emily and Lorenzo's simmering attraction peaked one fatal night as Isabella dug into her most recent studies on the botanical effects of urban pollution. Suspected of her sister's late-night excursions and Lorenzo's regular absences, Isabella chose to look into it. Emily's phone was unlocked on the coffee table, exposing a string of private notes and pictures shared between Emily and Lorenzo. Broken and angry, Isabella faced Lorenzo. At first, he denied everything, but under Isabella's relentless questioning, he came clean. Their participation was canceled right away, but the treachery was deep. Their relationship broken beyond repair. The once close sisters were now bitter rivals. A few weeks later, Emily vanished, under report. The local police started a search while her friends and relatives were running mad. Called in for interrogation, Isabella was a prime suspect because of her past conflicts with Emily. Isabella maintained her innocence and cooperated totally, despite their distance. Days stretched into weeks, devoid of Emily. Then a break in the case occurred, when a team, using ground-penetrating radar, found anomalies in a far-off area of a botanical garden where Isabella regularly worked. Digging started, and under a bed of rare orchids the remains of Emily Rizzini were found. Usually a haven of peace, the garden was now a grim crime scene. Called in to investigate the breakdown and environmental elements were forensic taphonomists. Based on their estimates, Emily had been buried for about 3 weeks, that is, during the period of her disappearance. The search got more intense, concentrating on Isabella because of her knowledge of plants and garden access. After learning her sister's betrayal, Isabella's colleagues and students' interviews revealed a committed but emotionally explosive woman, particularly. Among the data, a soil study around the burial site turned up traces of a rare toxin produced from a plant Isabella had been researching. Emily's remains revealed this poison, invisible without specific knowledge, which had been consumed. Experts in digital forensics also found erased messages from Isabella's phone that suggested threats made in a flash of wrath. A horrific story surfaced as detectives put the chronology together. Neighbors remembered seeing Isabella's car leaving her house at an odd hour on the evening Emily vanished. Confirming this was surveillance footage from a nearby gas station, showing Isabella shopping for shovels and other gardening tools. Though Isabella insisted she had been framed and maintained her innocence, these damning bits of proof squarely pointed at her. The media circus around the case presented Isabella as a cold-blooded killer motivated by jealousy and treachery. Guilt-ridden, Lorenzo turned away from the Rizzini family, his own life destroyed by the affair. The prosecution was sure about their case. The date of the trial was decided. The defense countered that someone knowing of Isabella's work could have readily framed her, and that the evidence was circumstantial. They suggested Lorenzo might be the real offender, trying to hide his tracks and get rid of both Rizzini sisters. Secrets and lies were revealed as the courtroom drama developed, resulting in startling disclosures about people closest to Emily. Buried as thoroughly as Emily herself, the truth would soon surface in a trial that enthralled the country. Starting on a gloomy Monday morning, the Isabella Rini trial attracted a varied mix of onlookers, reporters, and curious visitors. As the prosecution developed its case against Isabella, the courtroom hummed with expectation. Sharp-witted woman Celia Martino, the lead prosecutor, painstakingly examined the evidence to create a picture of a sister who had turned to murder. Scorned, Celia started off showing the digital forensics data, stressing the incriminating messages on Isabella's phone. "Your betrayal will not go unpunished," one message Emily received just days before she vanished. The courtroom murmured, the weight of Isabella's words sinking in. Celia then started the results of the soil analysis. Found in Emily's body and around the burial site, the rare poison came from the Conium maculatum plant. Isabella studied this plant, more usually known as hemlock. Believing it would go undetectable, the prosecution claimed Isabella's knowledge with the plant made her the ideal candidate to use as a murder weapon. Isabella's defense lawyer, Marco Fabbri, sat silently, noting things and sometimes whispering to his client as the prosecution spun its story. Marco was a seasoned defense attorney, noted for his ability to turn apparently perfect cases upside down. Marco walked calmly and confidently toward the jury when it came time to defend Isabella. "Ladies and gentlemen, although convincing, the evidence so far shows just circumstantial character. Remember, our guiding concept is reasonable doubt," he said. Marco began by negating the idea that Isabella was the only one with hemlock plant access. He asked a number of Isabella's colleagues to testify that many faculty members and students had access to the unsecured research area. "Everyone with basic botanical knowledge could have done this crime," Marco said. He turned the conversation then to Lorenzo Moretti. Cross-examination made it abundantly clear that Lorenzo's alibi for Emily's disappearance was at best weak. He said he was at a friend's house, but no one could confirm his account. Marco also disclosed that Lorenzo had a past of adultery and unstable relationships, implying that he had more drive than anybody to silence Emily and frame Isabella. The defense also brought documentation of Lorenzo's financial difficulties. In the weeks before Emily's death, bank records revealed a sequence of sizable withdrawals and dubious transactions. Desperate to get away from his financial problems and the messy mess of his love life, Marco reasoned that Lorenzo had set out the ideal scheme to eliminate the Rini sisters and begin again. The courtroom became more charged as the trial went on. Friends and family's testimonies presented contradicting images of both Isabella and Lorenzo. While some said Isabella was a loving sister who would never hurt Emily, others spoke of her developing resentment. In a similar vein, Lorenzo was shown by some as a charming, misinterpreted man, and by others as a cunning opportunist. The turning point came when Marco presented fresh forensic evidence, hitherto disregarded by the prosecution. Marco's team had found deleted GPS data from Lorenzo's car by means of modern digital forensics. Against his alibi, the information placed Lorenzo close to the botanical garden on the evening Emily vanished from sight. Shock waves from this disclosure rocked the courtroom. Lorenzo stood under increasing pressure. His confident manner had changed to show obvious discomfort. Marco conducted unrelenting cross-examination. "Mr. Moretti, could you clarify why that evening your car was at the botanical garden?" Lorenzo stammered, his responses growing ever erratic. Sensing the case falling from her hands, Celia Martino tried to refocus the attention on Isabella's incriminating notes and access to the hemlock. Still, the jury was now entirely focused on Lorenzo. Dramatically, a witness stepped forward without warning. Former staff member Maria Santos of Lorenzo's restaurant testified that she overheard Lorenzo talking with a friend about a strategy to get rid of the problem. Maria's testimony strengthened the defense's case that Lorenzo had planned the murder even though she couldn't offer specific information. Both sides made their last arguments as the trial drew to end. While Marco stressed the reasonable uncertainty about Lorenzo's involvement, Celia urged the jury to take into account the overwhelming circumstantial evidence against Isabella. Days of deliberation by the jury, the weight of the complicated case, clearly on their minds. At last, they decided. Isabella Rizzini was cleared of all charges, the reasonable doubt too strong to overlook. The courtroom burst in a mix of disbelief and relief. Immediately taken into custody for more inquiry, Lorenzo's future is now unknown. Though free, Isabella was left to reconstruct her broken life, tormented by the loss of her sister and the treachery. Isabella cleared, and then Lorenzo Moretti took front stage. The disclosure of his dubious behavior and the damning GPS data had turned the tide, but Emily's murder was still under investigation. Now, concentrating on Lorenzo, the police looked over all aspects of his life in search of specific evidence to accuse him of the crime. Lead investigator Detective Alessia Falco resolved herself to find the truth. Renowned for her exacting standards and keen sense of direction, Alessia dug thoroughly into Lorenzo's past. She came upon a history of financial instability, growing debt, and a pattern of dishonest behavior. Lorenzo clearly was a man capable of desperate behavior. Among the most shocking revelations was Lorenzo's connection with infamous loan shark Vincenzo Rossi. Rossi was known for his merciless nature. If his clients neglected to pay back their debt, they often found themselves in terrible situation. Lorenzo was clearly under great pressure, since he owed Rossi a large amount and lacked means to pay it back. Alessia and her colleagues started to put together a theory. Lorenzo saw Emily's death as a way out of his financial mess and complicated romantic entangements. By presenting Isabella, he could cut off both sisters from his life and deflect accusations directed toward him. When forensic accountants found a sizable money movement from Lorenzo's account to an offshore account connected to Rossi, the inquiry veered sharply. Just days before Emily vanished, this exchange suggested a possible payment for a sinister deed. Rossi was brought in under close inspection to be questioned. First stubborn, he finally acknowledged that Lorenzo had come to him for assistance. Rossi sensed a chance to take advantage of Lorenzo's desperation and volunteered his help, for a fee, on how to handle a difficult situation. Rossi insisted, however, that he only offered guidance and denied any direct participation in Emily's murder. Alessia understood she needed more to get a conviction. She looked at the botanical garden where Emily's body was discovered, called to review the plant life around the burial site. Forensic botanists swore Emily had been killed elsewhere and then relocated, according to traces of soil they found on her clothes that did not match the composition of the garden. The discovery came when looking over Lorenzo's land found a secluded greenhouse tucked behind a large tree grove. Inside, the cops discovered hemlock plants and gardening tools matching those bought by Lorenzo on the evening of the murder, in addition to traces of the same dirt found on Emily's body. Looking at this overwhelming proof, Lorenzo's facade fell apart. Desperate trying to save himself, he admitted. He said he was luring Emily to his house, pretending he wanted to talk things over. Once there, he poisoned her with a mixture created from the hemlock plants, hoping to give her death an unintentional look. He carried her body to the botanical garden after she passed from the poison, hoping to frame Isabella and clear his own guilt from view. Once Lorenzo's trial started, the courtroom came alive once more. This time the story was unambiguous. Led by Celia Martino, the prosecution made a strong case based on Rossi's testimony, forensic evidence, and Lorenzo's confession, so creating an unquestionable case. Isabella sat silently throughout the trial, staring just at Lorenzo. Once a cherished member of her life, the man was now revealed as a deliberate killer. Her feelings were a wild mix of anger, grief, and relief. The jury debated just a few hours before rendering a decision. Found guilty of first-degree murder, Lorenzo Moretti received a life-in-prison sentence without chance for parole. The courtroom, which had seen so much heartache and drama, was at last calm. Even cleared, Isabella had to start over in her life. Originally split over her innocence, the community came around her in support. Once demonized by the media, it now presented her as a tragic heroine, unfairly accused. In the next months, Isabella turned to her work for comfort. Hoping to somehow bring some good out of the nightmare she had gone through, she committed herself to investigating the medicinal qualities of plants. Once a site of terror, the botanical garden turned into a haven where she might recover and rediscover her enthusiasm. Everyone engaged in Emily's murder, and the following trials suffered lifelong effects. Though permanently altered, Isabella and her family figured out how to forward. From his jail cell, Lorenzo could only consider the damage his actions had caused to people around him, as well as himself. Though the scars stayed, justice had been done. Though the road to healing was long, Isabella took one step at a time, driven to honor Emily's memory by living a life of purpose and compassion, with the help of her friends, family, and community. Once the dust settled on the dramatic events separating the Rizzini family, Isabella started to regain her footing. The truth had at last surfaced, and the trial was over. But the emotional toll was severe. Still, among the loss and turmoil, a road toward recovery and introspection became clear, retaching to a peaceful countryside where she could find comfort and distance from the memories of the past months. Isabella missed work. Surrounded by nature, she lost herself in the little pleasures of tending to a small plot full of different plants. Remembering the times they spent together in better days, she felt most like Emily here. Once dubious and critical, the community came to support Isabella. Neighbors helped keep her house, brought meals, and offered company. Though little, their gestures had great power to let Isabella know she was not alone. Isabella was invited to give a guest lecture on her botanical research by a nearby university via Letter 1, one day. It was a chance to get back into her work life and share her knowledge with eager students. She agreed tentatively, seeing value in teaching others and promoting the need of botanical research. Students, colleagues, and community members were crammed into the lecture hall. Isabella had clarity and confidence again as she spoke. She highlighted the resiliency and fortitude that results from conquering difficulty by sharing not only her scientific expertise, but also the personal trip she had gone on. A young student came up to her following the lecture to say she admired her bravery and will. "Your story motivated me to seek a job in forensic botany," the student said. Isabella grinned, a glimmer of hope for her experience perhaps influencing others. Writing helped Isabella too. She was writing a memoir about her trip. She went into great length on the complexity of her relationship with Emily, the hurtful betrayal, and the road to justice and healing. Writing turned into a therapeutic process that helped her to sort through her feelings and get closure. Published and much praised was the memoir, Roots of Resilience. Isabella's narrative of love, loss, and atonement connected to readers. For those going through their own hardships, it turned into a ray of hope, since it demonstrated that there is a road forward, even in the worst of circumstances. Ultimately, although tragic, Isabella's life turned into evidence of the human spirit's strength and resiliency. She kept working, now with more of a goal in mind, and created Emily's memory, a community garden. This garden came to represent life, development, and the close relationship among sisters. Once unfairly accused and depressed by loss, Isabella Rini came out stronger, committed her life to honoring her sister's memory and serving others. Though the road had been difficult, she came to see from the ashes of tragedy that fresh starts can blossom and that healing is possible.